In this video, we'll look at how representations are merged in a recursive neural network. So we briefly described the recursive neural network in the previous video, where after we've extracted a syntactic parse tree of a sentence, then we essentially merge representations by following the structure of the syntactic parse tree. And these representations are merged by a neural network. And so now we'll see specifically what kind of structure was used by Richard Socher and his co-authors for merging the vector representations of the words and the phrases in the sentence. So the neural network that they use is actually quite simple. It essentially corresponds to a neural network where we have just a hidden layer, which is called P, which is connected to the concatenation of the two input vector representations C1 and C2. So C1 and C2 might be either the representation of some words or of some phrase which is covered by an internal node in the syntactic tree. And then P is going to correspond to the new vector representation for the node that has C1 and C2 as its children in the syntactic tree. And so specifically, this representation will be obtained by taking the concatenation of the vectors C1 and C2 multiplied by a matrix W, adding a bias, and then passing that through a nonlinearity, for instance, a sigmoidal nonlinearity. And so P will then become either C1 of C2 of a new call to the same neural net with the same weights W and B, which will be merging this P and then perhaps some other vector representation in the syntactic tree as we move along towards the root of the syntactic tree. So that's the representation, that's the parameterization of the neural net that does the merging of the vector representation. And another thing that this neural network will do is actually compute a score of how essentially the quality of the merge. How appropriate is it to take C1 and C2 and merge it into a vector which corresponds to P. And to get this score, they essentially only model it as a linear transformation of the merged representation P. So you take the vector P multiplied by W scored, a different, in this case not a matrix, but a vector that's multiplied by P and gives a real valued score. And this score is actually going to be used as a sort of estimate of the quality of the merge. And essentially, it's going to be used to decide which pairs of representations should we merge first as we construct a syntactic tree. So in other words, it's going to be used to determine what is the best syntactic tree to use in order to extract the vector representation of the different phrases and then ultimately the sentence. So how to get its vector representation. And so that part will be useful in the next video when we start talking about how to extract the syntactic tree from a given sentence.